I sank into the velvet chair, the smell of wood dust and paint still clinging to my hands after a long day at the construction site. Outside the window, Boston lit up each boat glowing like a slow drifting star across the water. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. I was going to ignore it, until the screen flashed Riley, in a white wedding dress, her smile flawless, standing in front of the harbor where I once helped Father fix the roof. Below the photo was a flood of comments. "I can't believe this day is finally happening. So proud of Diane's daughter. The Marshall family is absolutely wonderful." I scrolled down. Aunt Helen's name, Uncle Frank's, Cousin Olivia's, all there, decorated with heart emojis and clinking glasses. Everyone was invited. Except me. The Cabernet in my hand trembled, the deep red liquid shimmering like blood against the wooden floor. My heart dropped, my throat tightened, and between the distant sound of ship horns from the harbor, a question escaped my lips, cold and sharp as a blade. What wedding? The feeling was no longer surprise, but the exact moment I realized I had been cut out of the family picture they had just taken. Before I continue this story, I want to know, where are you from? And what time is it for you right now? Like and subscribe to my channel so I can tell you what I did next. Now, let's go back to my apartment that night. My name is Quinn Marshall, and I am 33 years old. The room was utterly silent. The ticking of the clock sounded like metal slicing through air. I looked back at the screen. The city lights reflected off the glass, blending with the photo until my face appeared faintly in the corner, blurred, ghostly, like a stranger who had accidentally wandered into someone else's memory. The phone buzzed again this time. An incoming call. Mom, Diane Marshall. I let it ring until it nearly stopped before answering. Quinn. I was just about to call you. How's the project going? Sweetheart. Are you doing okay? Her voice was soft, steady, deliberately casual, the tone she used when she was about to lie. I'm fine, but I just saw Riley's photo in a wedding dress at Harborview Grand. The line went silent. Only her faint breathing remained, as thin as air whistling through a door crack. Oh, that... My mother hesitated. Everything happened so fast. You know how it is. Riley's very sensitive, and I was afraid you were too busy and couldn't make it in time. Each word felt soaked in syrup, sweet, smooth, and suffocating. Busy, sensitive. 2 gentle words disguising betrayal. I didn't get an invitation. Mom, you're always busy. Quinn, Riley just wanted a peaceful day. A peaceful day means a day without me. My mother sighed. That sigh, I'd heard it all my life. When I was 6 and broke her vase. She sighed. When I won a university scholarship. She sighed again. I knew you could do it. When Riley fell into debt and I paid it off. She said, you're the older sister. Stronger. Don't hold it against her. Now. It was the same refrain. Strong. Independent. Doesn't need anyone. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile she would have called disrespectful. Mom. Funny thing. Have you ever wondered how Riley's supposed to grow up if I'm always the one forced to be the adult for her silence? I pictured her pressing her lips together, eyes shifting away, searching for a new subject. Don't overreact. Quinn. She needs peace. After everything, she deserves to be happy. And I don't. You know that's not what I meant. Yes. It is. Mom. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't talking to my mother. I was talking to the public relations manager of the Marshall family brand. I could hear the faint TV and the clink of silverware on plates in the background. A peaceful family dinner. Except I wasn't in that frame. Riley's fragile. Quinn. Please don't say anything that might hurt her. I chuckled softly. Don't worry. Mom. I wasn't invited to say anything. Remember. Before she could reply. I hung up. The last sound I heard was her half-swallowed Quinn. Not concern, but shock that I'd dared to end the call first. I stood there in the dark. Boston glittered outside, while my apartment sat in dim, cold light slipping through the curtains. I opened my social media list. Riley Marshall, Diane Marshall, a string of family names: Aunt Helen, Uncle Frank, Olivia. My finger moved slowly, as if performing an ancient ritual. Unfollow. 1, 2, 3. Each name disappeared from the screen, light as breath, leaving behind a different kind of emptiness, not pain, just hollow space. I looked out the window. A ship was leaving the dock, its lights dragging a golden streak across the black water. The wind from the harbor carried the scent of salt and damp metal. I set the phone down, leaned back in the chair, and listened to the long, mournful sound of the ship's horn drifting through the night. It turned out silence could be an answer. 2. I once believed family love was something worth preserving at all costs, like an old collapsing house, thinking if I just held up the beams long enough, it would stay standing. But now I understand some houses rot from within. And letting go isn't abandonment. It's choosing to stop burning yourself alive just to keep them from falling. I whispered, my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. Enough. That night, watching the ship's trail of lights fade into the distance, I made a decision. No one in my family ever thought I would this time. I wouldn't patch their cracks anymore. I would face them. Rain began to fall as I drove away from Boston. Streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt, spreading like streaks of oil. The wipers swept back and forth, their steady rhythm sounding like my heart, trying to maintain a fake calm. The radio played softly, an old female voice singing about houses that stay lit even when no one waits for anyone to come home anymore. I turned it off. The road to Salem had never felt this long. Maple trees lined both sides, their leaves dripping water onto my windshield. I had driven this route hundreds of times: Riley's birthdays, Christmases. Thanksgiving's always the one who arrived early, who cleaned up, who kept things together. But today I was returning not to tidy things up, but to see clearly how everything was falling apart. Salem had never felt this far. Even though the distance was only a little over 40 minutes by car, the pale yellow colonial house appeared behind the rain-soaked trees. The kitchen light glowed warmly through the curtains, the kind of light my mother always called the warmth of family. But tonight, it looked more like stage lighting, where everyone was perfectly playing their part. My father was in the garage, bent over the old pickup truck, a grease rag in his hand, when he heard my engine stop. He looked up, froze for half a second, then quickly bent back down like a man who spotted a crack in the wall but chose to pretend it wasn't there. I stepped onto the porch. The smell of cinnamon and butter hit me, the familiar scent of every negotiation in this house. Quinn. My mother's voice called from the kitchen. Light and sweet. The kind of voice that reminded me why people trusted her so easily. When did you get here? I just finished the lasagna. I stood in the doorway. On the dining table lay wedding flower catalogs, sample invitations, and a guest list. A single opened envelope face down. I picked it up. Empty. Not lost, just never prepared for me. Sit down and eat first. Then we'll talk, she said. No need. I just have one question. I turned the envelope between my fingers. Is this the thing everyone forgot to send me? The smile on her lips froze. She adjusted her apron. Her voice dropped to a soft murmur. You know how sensitive Riley is. Everything happened so fast. I was afraid you couldn't make arrangements in time. Not in time or not appropriate. The air in the kitchen thickened. My father appeared in the back doorway. His eyes on me, not angry, only pleading. Don't stir things up. Quinn. I looked around the kitchen, the wooden cabinets I had painted myself years ago. The old family photos of the happy Marshall family. Now they looked like props for a story I'd been erased from long ago. If they could erase me from the invitation, they could erase me from anything else. My mother sat down, her back straight, her voice lowered to a whisper. Evan just wants everything to go smoothly. He's afraid you'll make Riley feel pressured. You know, you're always too strong. Strong, the word used to justify every injustice. Strong means staying silent, so others can keep being wrong. Doesn't it? Mom, I asked. She pressed her lips together. Didn't deny it. Just stayed quiet. And that's when I realized in this house, silence was the most effective way to lie. My father spoke softly. Don't make this a big thing. Quinn, this family needs peace. Peace for whom I turned to him. For Riley, the one who ran into debt and ran away, or for Mom who covers it all up to keep the image perfect. My mother stood up, her tone turning cold. You don't understand how hard it is to be a single mother. I just want Riley to have a new beginning, without anyone bringing up the past. So we just pretend it never happened. She stayed silent. I laughed quietly, almost like an exhale. I get it now. In this house, truth is always the first guest crossed off the invitation list. In this house, they considered honesty, the thing that causes shame, not the actions that deserve it. The rain grew heavier as I opened the door. My mother called after me, her voice no longer soft but sharp. Don't embarrass this family. Quinn Riley's getting married, stop causing trouble. I paused at the porch. Relax. Mom, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just not cleaning up after it anymore. My father's voice trembled. Sweetheart, things will pass. No. Dad. I turned back. I'm not letting it pass. I'm letting it show exactly as it is. I stepped down from the porch. Cold rain swept across my face, soaking into my collar, but it felt lighter than what I'd carried for years, the burden of keeping this house standing when its foundation was already cracked. On the roof, the fresh coat of paint gleamed under the light. I knew too well what lay beneath rotted beams. Hollow inside, just one strong gust away from collapse. This family was the same. They called it stability. I called it structural failure. As I drove out of Salem that night, I thought I'd seen every kind of deception they could use to protect their image. What I didn't know was that the thing rotting wasn't just the roof, but the numbers in the bank accounts bearing their names. That night, I thought everything was over when I left Salem, but the phone buzzed close to midnight. On the screen, one word appeared, Dad. I stared at it for a long time. In my mind, his face appeared, the man who chose silence instead of standing on the side of truth. I almost let it ring out. But the rain outside hit harder against the window, and I heard myself whisper, Dad. What is it? His voice was weak, breaking, as if carried through mist. I need to talk to you. It's about the house, about money. I didn't ask further. I just listened to the sound of rain and his heavy breathing on the other end. When he said, The bank will take the house if we don't pay within 3 days. I knew this wasn't just a family matter anymore. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Outside, a figure stood drenched in the rain, shoulders hunched. My father, his khaki jacket was soaked, carrying the smell of gasoline and sweat, as if he had driven straight from Salem to Boston without stopping. I opened the door. The scent of rain and damp earth followed him in. No need to make tea, he said, voice trembling. I just need a few minutes. He set a large envelope on the table. Water dripped from his coat, pooling on the edge of the paper. I looked at it. I didn't even have to open it to know something was wrong. When I saw his silhouette in the rain, I already knew someone had just lost the ability to lie. I walked to the table and turned on the lamp. The yellow light reflected off the wet paper, making the ink blur into blue-violet streaks. Inside the envelope was a stack of documents, bank papers, receipts, and statements. At the top corner of the first page, my name, Quinn Marshall, stood out in bold letters, with a signature line right below it. I looked up, waiting for him to speak. My father stared down, his veined hands trembling, thumbs rubbing together like a man praying. I'm sorry, Quinn, your mother and I used your name to open a loan. He blinked slowly, not from surprise, but because, in that moment, I saw myself again, the person who always paid the price for things she didn't create. How much? $195,000. A home equity line. Who signed for it? Your mother. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. His voice crumbled. Back then, we were struggling. Riley needed money for her divorce attorney. Evan wasn't around yet. Your mother said it was just temporary, and you'd never find out. I opened each page. The signature was familiar, but not mine. The strokes were curved, careful, and deliberate, identical to my mother's handwriting. I thought I was used to disappointment until I saw my own name in the signature box. I asked softly, "The money I send you every month to help with the house payments?" He nodded. "It was actually for this loan. Your mother said it'd be easier if you believed you were helping with the mortgage. She didn't want you to feel guilty." I inhaled slowly, as if trying to preserve the last piece of my humanity. The smell of wet paper, ink, and mildew from the envelope blended together. The scent of a lie kept too long. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone and opened the camera. Click. 1 shot. 2. 3. H page. H signature. Each number. My father looked at me, eyes filled with both fear and relief. "What are you doing?" "Keeping evidence." I dabbed the smeared ink dry with a tissue and placed the papers back exactly as they were. The room filled only with the sound of rain hitting the window and the steady ticking of the clock. I sat down across from him. "Do you know this is a crime?" Daddy swallowed hard. "I know. But your mother, she just thought keeping the house mattered more. She's terrified of losing face." I didn't shout. I took more photos because evidence is always more honest than memory. The lamplight reflected off his face, showing the wrinkles around his mouth lines carved by years of saying things his heart didn't believe. I felt pity but not trust. Everything in that room, the damp air, the sound of his breathing smelled of decay. "Why tell me now?" I asked. He spoke slowly. "Because the bank refused an extension. No one will lend to your mother anymore after what happened with Riley. They're calling the debt in 3 days. If we can't pay, they'll seize the house." I leaned back in my chair. Everything went quiet. "Does Mom know you're here?" "No. She'd go crazy if she knew. But I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want you to find out from someone else." I nodded slightly. Eyes on the pile of papers. The red letters for closure notice glared at the bottom of the last page. Right under borrowers, Cynthia Marshall. Quinn Marshall. I took one final photo, then closed the folder gently. My voice was low and steady. "From now on, I'll handle everything. But don't tell Mom I know. If she wants to keep pretending, let her pretend until the curtain falls." He looked at me, stunned. I stood and walked to the door. The rain was still falling, wind hissing through the hallway. "Go home. Dad, I'm not angry tonight, but tomorrow everything changes." He stepped out slowly, his gait heavy, like a man leaving a courtroom. When the door closed behind him, I turned back to the table and switched on a brighter light. The papers were still there, damp, but glimmering under the warm glow. I once thought they lied just to save face. But now I knew they lied to survive. And when survival was at stake, they were willing to sign my name on anything. That night, the wall clock read 11:47 p.m. I was still sitting at my desk, surrounded by the scent of paper and cooled tea. My father's file still lay there, dried after I had used the hairdryer to warm it. A small ping sounded soft, yet it shook the whole room. On the screen, Riley Marshall, I need to talk. No greeting. No emoji. No exclamation mark. Just 4 cold, bare words. I stared at her name. It had been 3 years since I was the only one not invited to my own sister's wedding. I couldn't tell what made my heart beat faster, the notification sound or the voice of the past echoing in my head. I typed back, when the reply came seconds later: tomorrow. Old Cafe. Tin A. M. No explanation needed. Old Cafe, there was only one harbor brew, where the two of us once studied together, laughing over a pie burnt at the edges. I turned off my phone, but that night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, Boston was silver gray. Dim light filtered through the window pane, glinting off the long wooden table where Riley was already seated, a cup of cappuccino before her, its foam still intact. I paused at the doorway for a second. She looked up and smiled faintly, a trembling smile, like someone relearning how to move after a long illness. You came. You said you needed to talk. My tone was calm. I pulled out a chair and sat down. The space between us was no more than an arm's length, yet it felt like two cities apart. Riley avoided my gaze, her fingers tracing the handle of the cup. I know you're angry. I'm also afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of Mom. Afraid everything will fall apart. I didn't know they used your name. I looked at her. Riley's eyes were still beautiful, the kind of beauty people want to believe in. But behind them, I saw only emptiness. The light in her eyes, still the light of someone expecting forgiveness, not someone who understands guilt. I remembered when we were little in every family photo. I always stood half outside the frame. Mom said it was so Riley could be centered for better balance. Whenever I brought home a drawing, she nodded politely. But when Riley sang a few lines, she beamed with joy. I never felt jealousy, only the quiet awareness that I had become the perfect background for someone else's spotlight. As we grew up, I got used to every compliment in our house beginning with, "Riley is so adorable," and ending with, "and your sister is so strong." That's when I learned strong was how they said, "You don't need to be loved." And from then on, I learned how to disappear just to keep the peace. Back to the present. Riley's voice softened to a whisper. I only found out when I saw the papers. But Mom said if you knew, you'd hate me forever. I just wanted everything to stay calm. Calm. That word again, like the old background music our family always played whenever they needed to cover an earthquake. I stirred my coffee. The spoon clinking against the porcelain sounded like a countdown. You're afraid Mom will collapse, Riley said. Eyes glassy. I looked up, and who was ever afraid that I might collapse? The space around us froze. The espresso machine, the barista calling orders, all of it echoed into a distant hum. Emotional echo. Riley didn't answer right away. She looked up, lips trembling. I didn't know you could bear so much. I thought you were fine. You're always fine. I smiled faintly. Being fine is the easiest way to keep everyone else from feeling guilty. She fell silent. I looked at my hands calloused from saws and rough wood. Riley's hands were smooth, nails polished in pale colors. Two worlds that would never meet again. Her voice quivered. I'm afraid Mom will collapse, and I wondered who had ever feared my collapse. Wind brushed the window, making the white curtain tremble. Our reflections merged in the glass, one clear, one blurred. My entire childhood, I had been the background for someone else's light. And now, even sitting face to face, I was still just a shadow. I set my cup down and drew a long breath. Riley. She looked up, eyes waiting. You don't need to apologize. And I don't need to forgive. Riley froze. I went on. What we need is the truth. This time, I won't disappear just to make life easier for everyone else. Her lips quivered, her eyes welled up. I don't want to lose you. You never had me. I stood, ready to leave. Riley called after me. Mom misses you. I stopped, turned slightly, and smiled. She only misses the part of me she can control. My voice was gentle, not bitter, just one last, bare truth. I walked away. In the cafe's glass door, I saw Riley's reflection, head bowed. hands clasping her cup, as if trying to hold on to warmth already gone. I knew that feeling. I'd been the one sitting there once. I stepped outside into the street. Behind me, the doorbell rang a small sound that carried far, like the echo of something ending, but I knew the real echo was only just beginning. That morning, for the first time, I didn't wake up feeling indebted to anyone. The early light filtered through the curtains, touching the desk where the once wet documents still bore faint spots. The smell of coffee drifted through the air, bitter and sharp. The taste of awareness. I gathered the papers, labeling each stack mortgage fraud, forged signature, timeline of payments. A red pen cut across the line. Year 2021. HELOC opened under the name Quinn Marshall. My hand no longer trembled. That morning, for the first time, I didn't wake up feeling indebted to anyone. On the desk, the phone buzzed. A message from Dad. Your mother still doesn't know what I told you last night. Don't blame her. I stared at the words for a long moment, then deleted them. Not out of anger, but because, for the first time, I chose not to respond. I opened my laptop. The pale blue glow from the screen lit my cheek, one by one. The PDF files appeared: wire receipts, bank statements, insurance invoices, every trace they had left in their panic. I printed them all, arranging them neatly into folders. On the final page, I wrote in black ink, "Everything has a paper trail." A low, familiar voice came through the speaker. "Quinn, I heard you're having trouble with that HELOC account." "Yes, but it isn't mine." The voice belonged to Harold Byrne, my former mentor back when I worked on restoration projects for the bank. He was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you want to sue them? I want to reclaim what's mine. As for them, I'll let the law decide." The lawyer asked if I wanted revenge. I told him I only wanted to take back my share. Leaning back in my chair, I looked out the window. The city below was brightening. Streetcars screeched along the wet avenues. I once believed justice had to be shouted loud. Now I knew sometimes silence cuts deeper than any scream. I remembered when Riley broke Mother's crystal vase. I took the blame so she wouldn't be scolded. Back then, I thought that was strength. Now I realize that was the moment I learned to take responsibility for other people's sins. This time is different. I won't take revenge by causing pain. I'll let them taste the silence I once endured, and let the law speak for me. I heard the soft tapping of keys on the other end. I'll draft a letter to the bank requesting signature verification. But, Quinn, yes, be ready. When you touch their money, they'll lose their minds. I smiled. I'm used to that. My whole life. They only felt peace when I stayed silent. Now they'll learn how to live with the sound of my voice. By noon, I printed the letter to the bank and sent a copy to the lawyer. I opened my phone and scrolled through contacts. Tapped on Mom. My finger paused for a second, then delete contact. Next was Riley. Delete. No tears. No trembling. Just the feeling of lightness, like someone had finally removed a rope from around my neck. I blocked my mother's number. My hand didn't shake. On the email screen, I typed from Quinn Marshall to Cynthia Marshall, subject all future communication. All communications regarding financial or legal matters will be handled through attorney Harold Byrne. I ask that you respect this boundary. I pressed send. The soft whoosh echoed a small sound, but it felt like my own declaration of independence. I picked up my phone and played some music. The old female singer's voice filled the room. Some walls are built to protect, some to finally be free. I smiled. My walls finally built in the right place. That afternoon, while reviewing the files, my phone vibrated again. A message from Mother You, just destroyed this family. I sat still for a moment, listening to the wind whistle through the doorframe. Another message followed. It's all your fault. Riley won't come home anymore. Less than an hour later, the screen lit again. Riley wrote, I begged Mom not to call you again. I don't want more trouble. I read it but didn't reply. Then came Dad. He sent a photo of the Salem house from a distance. The roof we once painted together. No caption. I looked at it for a long while, then saved it into a folder, labeled Archive. Like storing an artifact not to remember. But to prove it once existed, I placed the phone face down. Afternoon light streamed through the window, sweeping across the wooden desk where the files were lined in order. The papers reflected the light like mirrors, and within them, I saw myself calm, no longer blurred by anyone's shadow. I picked up my pen and signed the statement of claim Harold had emailed me. The signature was steady and deliberate, not curved, not shaky, not forged. Mother said I destroyed this family. But I thought, you can't destroy something that's already broken. What I'm doing is simply clearing the ruins of what they once called family. That morning, Boston had no sunlight. Only the blue glow of the TV screen trembled against the wall like a breath. On the morning news, the Channel 7 logo spun unsafe, then stopped at the scrolling headline, Marshall family under investigation for mortgage fraud. I froze in the kitchen. The coffee cup in my hand suddenly felt heavy as iron. Behind me, the window was half open. A gust of wind blew the newspaper off the counter. The finance page lay spread wide on the floor, my mother's photograph at the center. Her confident charity event smile now framed in red. I didn't turn the volume up. I just watched the subtitles roll steadily across the bottom of the screen. Sources confirmed the case began with an internal complaint. My heart tightened, not pain, just pressure. The phone on the table vibrated nonstop. 30 missed calls. From Riley. From reporters. From people who once called our family a model of integrity. Truth doesn't knock, it kicks the door open. Outside, I heard neighbors whisper behind the fence. A man's voice. She's the one who filed against her own mother. Another answered. Is that true? I turned off the TV, refilled my coffee, and drank it in a single gulp. The burnt bitterness mixed with the damp smell of last night's rain. There was no going back now. Truth once spoken never finds its way home again. Outside, broadcast vans crackled through the neighborhood, the reporter's voice repeating my full name. Inside, the old wall clock ticked steadily. The world I had tried to keep silent for so many years was now being pried open by the very people who once told me, "Don't make a scene." I sat in the middle of the room, hearing my own name echo through the rain, and realized they weren't really talking about me. They were talking about themselves, people terrified of what happens when truth dares to step out of the dark. By noon, as the first heavy drops of the season began to fall, my phone lit again. Riley's name flashed. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was hoarse, laced with sobs. Please, withdraw the case. Mom can't take it anymore. The press is all over the house. She can't take it, I asked quietly. Or she can't take people knowing silence. Then a trembling sigh. You don't understand. They're questioning me. My friends. And my job. Everyone hates us now. Good. Just one word. Now you know what it feels like to be turned on by your own family. Riley went silent for a long time. Through the phone I could hear the rain striking the roof and the sound of swallowed sobs. Finally she whispered, Do you hate me that much I once saved them from public shame? Now the public saved me from them. Leaning back in my chair, I looked out the window. No hate. You're just tasting what I had to swallow. The difference is, no one ever called to beg mercy for me. On the other end, Riley broke down in muffled cries, then hung up. I watched the screen fade to black and the blue light die out, leaving the room in silence. For the first time, silence had a sweetness to it. That night, my father appeared at my door without warning. He stood under the porch, rain soaking his shoulders, holding a paper bag from our old diner. I brought food. I nodded and stepped aside. We sat at the table with only a small candle between us. Rain beat against the window. The soup's fading warmth filled the air. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Then he set the spoon down and exhaled. You were right. I looked up. No apology. No tears. Just those 3 words, simple. Heavy. And real enough to make my chest tighten. He didn't say sorry. He just said you were right. That was enough. We sat quietly. I looked at his hands, the same hands that once held a hammer, teaching me to paint walls when I was little. Now they trembled not from age, but from learning that his daughter was no longer small. The candlelight shimmered in his eyes, weak, but honest, and I realized maybe forgiveness doesn't need words. Sometimes, it only needs the person who once stood above you to finally bow their head. In that moment, I no longer felt like the rebellious daughter, but like someone who had finally learned to stand upright, by the power of her own silence. The next morning, the phone's ring woke me. A former colleague had sent a news link: Marshall matriarch faces legal action by her daughter. Beneath the headline was my mother's photo, flawless makeup. Eyes wide. Smile frozen beneath the reporter's flash. Below it, thousands of comments. Serves the hypocrite right. Respect to the daughter who stood up. Money can't hide the truth. I scrolled down. Another image, my mother entering the courthouse. Head bowed. Face half covered. I stared until the picture blurred. The window rattled. Cold wind swept in. I closed the curtains, turned away, and took a long breath. On the desk, the phone lit once more, Riley. I let it ring. Outside, camera shutters clicked relentlessly, each flash slicing through the curtain like a blade. My name was in the headline above my mother's face. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I only felt free. In the days following the lawsuit, Boston felt like an old stage that had just been torn down. The news overflowed each headline, another scissor cut deep into the Marshall family's past. News vans lined the narrow street where I lived. Every morning when I opened the door, camera flashes flared like lightning. I didn't go out, didn't answer interviews, didn't post, didn't write a single word. The louder they screamed, the louder my silence echoed. At first, that silence scared me, as if by not speaking, someone else would write my story for me. But then I realized they can only define those still desperate to explain. I brewed tea, sat by the window, and watched the news scroll across my phone screen, then turned it off. Outside, the wind carried a newspaper with my mother's photo over the fence. It caught on a branch, swayed, and then tore in two, a simple image. Yet I understood once the wind truly rises, no one can control its direction. One afternoon, my inbox filled with exclusive offers. NBC, Timeline, even a publishing house wanted me to tell the real version of the story. All promised complete honesty. I deleted them all, until the last email appeared. The sender's address read Cynthia Marshall. Not my mother, her lawyer. My client would like to propose a public reconciliation. The meeting will be held in the presence of the press to ensure transparency of family relations. I leaned back in my chair and let out a quiet laugh. Strange. The people who once hid from the truth now wanted transparency. I replied in 3 lines. No need for anything public. I only want silence. And I will keep it as my legal right. Sometimes not answering is the only way to make them hear themselves. That evening, the phone rang. My mother's lawyer's voice came through, soft as if negotiating the price of truth. You understand? Quinn, the media needs to hear something from you. I replied calmly. If they need sound, they can turn on the TV. I'm not here to feed their hunger for curiosity. A long pause. Then he lowered his voice. You're ruining your own image. I smiled faintly. No, I'm letting it heal. After the call, I set the phone down on the table. The house was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. For the first time, I realized that silence truly had shape, rhythm, and weight. The following week, I returned to the office, The old brick building by the Charles River still smelled of paint and dust. Colleagues looked at me with mixed expressions: respect, curiosity, and a hint of pity. I simply nodded, opened my laptop, and resumed the restoration design for the old library I had left unfinished 2 months earlier. Morning light filtered through the windows, spilling over the wooden desk marked with cuts and grooves. I placed my hand on the drawing board, pencil gliding lightly but steadily, each line a breath. No one spoke. The room held only the sound of graphite on paper and the ticking of the clock. I didn't speak. I rebuilt. When the final sketch was done, I left the office late. Outside, the wind from the Charles brushed past, carrying the scent of damp wood and aged paint. The air against the glass sounded like the city exhaling. In that stillness, I could hear everything: the flow of water, the flap of wings, the steady beat of my own heart. And I realized silence hadn't killed me, as they once warned. It was saving me. Each step on the pavement felt like stepping out of one chapter, leaving behind every noise that had once drowned me. One morning, my boss stopped by my desk and said quietly, "This project will bear your name, Marshall Hall." I looked up, surprised. He smiled. "Not because of them, but because you made the wreckage look orderly." A month later, an article began circulating online: Quinn Marshall, the woman who refused to speak. The piece didn't interview me, didn't quote a single word, only photos me leaving the office, design plans in hand, the wind pushing a strand of hair across my face. The subheading read, "Not every battle needs a shout. Some people win by saying nothing." I read it, then closed my laptop. No joy, no pride, just peace. The article ended with one line: "Silence has its own sound if you're brave enough to hear it." I smiled softly, because in the end, my silence had echoed exactly where it needed to. That morning, Boston was bathed in gentle golden light. No reporters, no noisy headlines, only the sparrows outside the window and the scent of coffee filling the kitchen. I stood by the glass door, watching the city reflected in a glass of water. Everything looked the same: the streets, the Charles River, the red brick houses, only I was different. The world hadn't changed, I just stopped trying to fight it. I opened my laptop. The inbox was strangely quiet. No interview requests. No dramatic subject lines. Only one email from a name I hadn't seen in months. Riley. "Quinn, I don't know where to start, but I want to see you. Not to justify anything, only to say, I understand now." I looked at the message, feeling a calm I hadn't expected. No anger, no anticipation, just peace, the kind that comes when the wind has finally swept over a burned-out field. The cafe sat on the same old street corner where we used to go as kids, still the same scratched wooden tables, sunlight cutting through leaves, and the faint smell of baked pastries. Riley was already there, holding her cup with both hands as if asking permission from the past. I sat down. Between us stretched a silence so long we could hear the grinder humming behind the counter. "You were right," she said, voice trembling. "I thought you only wanted to win. Now I see you just wanted peace." I looked straight into her eyes. The arrogance was gone, only exhaustion and realization remained. "I didn't say I forgive you. I simply nodded. And sometimes, that is enough. Some apologies don't need to be spoken, only to be true enough to be heard." As I left the cafe, Riley called after me. "If that day I had listened to you sooner, everything would have been different." I turned back and answered softly, "No, things have to break before we can see our own foundation." Her smile was sad but real. For the first time in years, I felt we both understood something without words. 2 weeks later, Marshall Hall officially opened. The old library, restored after more than a year of work, now glowed with bright oak panels, sunlight streaming through its round glass windows. People came to take photos and to offer congratulations. The press didn't ask about family only, How does it feel to finish a project that was once abandoned? I answered with a smile. I used to build homes for them. Now I build for myself. When I cut the ribbon, applause rose soft, unshowy. A group of students held up a small sign. Thank you for showing us that steadiness can also be courage. Afternoon light poured through the window panes, touching my face, the same light I once avoided. I'm afraid it would expose my past. Now, it simply felt warm. That evening, I returned to my house by the river. The yellow lamp cast light on the walls where I still hung my very first blueprint. Outside, the wind brushed through the lavender garden. I sat on the wooden chair on the porch, the same place that had once heard trembling phone calls, where I had cried. I've been angry, and been afraid. Now, there was only silence, beautiful, like an unwritten song. On the table lay my old notebook. I opened to the last page and wrote, I've learned to love silence, because it isn't emptiness. It's where I finally meet myself again. If you've ever been forced into silence, remember, sometimes strength isn't in the words you speak, but in the peace you hold amid the noise. Share your story in the comments, because someone out there might need to hear your voice. Like and subscribe, so I can share more stories that carry meaning and heart, because your voice, whether spoken or silent, matters deeply. That morning, sunlight slipped softly through the curtain. The clock ticked in steady, gentle beats, and the faint mist of coffee hung over the kitchen air. No more phone calls, no more messages, no more voices, only silence, but this time, it wasn't frightening. I sat by the window, watching the light fall across my hand. For years, I had tried to prove that I was good enough, that I deserved to be heard, to be loved, to belong. Now, there was nothing left to prove. I had learned how to live without needing to be seen. And strangely enough, that was when I became free. Some wounds don't need healing. They just need to be left in peace so they can heal on their own. And some apologies will never come, but I no longer need to hear them. I don't want to forget the past. I only want to remember it without feeling my heart tighten. That, to me, is forgiveness. That is the real ending. Outside, the wind from the Charles River drifted by again, carrying the scent of wood, of water, and of peace. I closed my notebook, took a sip of cold coffee, and smiled, not because I had won, but because, finally, I no longer needed to.